Hello viewers, and a very warm welcome to another episode. Today we're going to be taking a look back at one of my favourite computers from 1994, Toshiba's answer to the portable computer. And I'm not talking laptops. Stay tuned and I'll see you after the intro. Okay, so you ready to see it? Wow. And there it is, Toshiba's answer to the portable PC in 1994. Now, there were a lot of manufacturers making laptops back at the time, but obviously we were restricted with what you could do with a laptop. So Toshiba thought, well, let's make a luggable PC, like a few other manufacturers did at the same time. But none of them had speakers built in like this, stereo speakers, or a full-size CD-ROM drive. You'd be mistaken if you thought this was a laptop, because at first glance it does look like one. It's not until you see this in the flesh you realise just how big it is. In fact, when I first bought it, back in 2019, I laughed out loud when I unboxed it when it came in the post. So I just couldn't believe the size of it. I'd owned a Toshiba T1950, I think, at the time, which was a lot smaller than this. In fact, all that had was a floppy disk drive. Let's take a quick look around the back. There's your AC input there, PS2 keyboard and mouse inputs, VJ out, serial, parallel and printer port there. You can also configure that for a floppy disk drive in the BIOS, SCCSI. And here we have the audio section, mic, audio out, audio in, and amplified speaker out. There's also a flap here that you can use to cover up the sockets when you're not using them. And around the left side of the PC, a little trap door here, and this is where you can plug in one of those PCMCI 4-size hard drives, or any other PCMCI device for that matter. And on this side is where you put your memory card in for the actual computer's memory. Here I have a 8MB card. This will take up to 40 megabytes in total. There's a 32 meg card here that I found recently. These are quite hard to get hold of actually. So with the onboard 8 meg, that can make up to 40 megabytes with that card. And on the front here you have the volume control for the built-in amplifier, along with a pop-out carry handle. There's no battery in this whatsoever, it's mains only. As I say, it has a full-size CD-ROM drive, a floppy drive, stereo speakers, and quite a neat feature as well, a removable keyboard. It's got some little feet there at the back. There's no mouse nipple on this. A lot of the computers back then, IBM especially and Toshiba, had a little mouse nipple in the middle. So on this you have to plug in an external mouse. You've got a serial option or a PS2 connection. So this came out in 1994. I was just 19 years old then, and in fact that very same year I bought my first ever brand new computer, my Commodore Amiga A600, and that cost me $169.99 then, which was a lot of money to me. This cost a whopping $7,000 back in 1994. In fact, there were 3 variations of this machine, which went up in price from that point. Okay, so let's have a look at those 3 different models I mentioned before. Mine's the 6600C, which is without CD-ROM. Then they did one with a CD-ROM, which had the abbreviation CD. And then you had the T6600C CDV. Now the CDV model had something else added to it. It had a MediaShare Mambo DVI Ethernet port. Now I've not managed to find any information out about this. I think it's some kind of video decoder card. So if anybody has any info on this, please let me know in the comments. So let's have a quick look at the specifications. The CPU is a i486DX2 running at 66 MHz. It has a built-in 8KB cache. You could add an optional 128K turbo cache module to this computer as well. Now, I've been searching for one of these for 2 years. I've never actually seen one. RAM is 8MB standard, 640KB conventional. It says 7.56MB, which can be configured as RAM drive. What else have we got here? 128KB shadow ROM, expanded up to 40MB. An optional 4MB, 8MB or 16MB user installable credit card style memory type card slot, and there's 2 slots for that. Video is 1MB of RAM. Graphics accelerator with line draw. And the sound system is a Microsoft Windows sound system on motherboard, it says. Now, I have had a little bit of trouble trying to get some games to work with this. I've been selecting a Creative Labs as a sound card and drivers for some of the software, but I've not had a lot of luck with some games. Unfortunately, my example here does have a few faults. The SCCSI CD-ROM drive is not working. It's not accepting a disk. In fact, you pop a disk into it and you can't get it back out. The floppy disk drive is not working. You can hear it judder as you power it up as it's seeking for it. But unfortunately, computers at this time here, especially the Toshibas, were belt driven for the floppy disk drive. And there's a really tiny little drive belt, I think it's about 1 or 2 millimeters in diameter, that fails basically. And to get it up to pieces is quite intricate from what I've seen so far. So I'll probably pass on trying to do repair on that. And the biggest fault that this seems to have is actually getting it to turn on in the first place. When it was sold to me back in 2019, the guy did actually tell me that it takes 2 or 3 minutes to come on. And now, since I've had it the last couple of years, it's taking anything up to half an hour to 45 minutes from cold. Once you do the rocker switch on the side, it will just sit there doing nothing for half an hour or more until you switched it off, left it for a couple of minutes, then turned it back on. Sometimes it will come straight on and sometimes it won't. The fault is very intermittent. So in this video today, we're going to be taking this apart, stripping it right down, replacing out that SCSI drive, and we'll disassemble the power supply and see if there's anything obvious. And while I'm there, I may just swap out all the capacitors, because from what I've seen of the power supply, it's buried quite deep inside. I don't really want to be going back into this again any time in the near future. So then the next thing to do will be to take it apart and have a look inside. Now, I have already had the bottom of this off in the past to remove the SCSI hard drive because that was faulty when it arrived. Disclaimer. Before I begin, I just want to state that this is by no means meant to be a tutorial. I'm just showing you how I did the work. My methods may not be the best way. Results will be depending on your level of skill, experience and the equipment used. I take no responsibility if you damage your equipment or harm yourself in the process, as these power supplies can still hold a high voltage even when powered down. If in any doubt, then do not attempt these repairs. So without further ado, let's get started. This video is chaptered. If you wish to skip ahead to a part that interests you, then please check the description below or hover across the timeline. I actually filmed this video quite some time ago now, so I'm going to do some narration over the disassembly procedure and through some of the other parts of the video. In today's video I decided to show the whole process of taking this computer apart, just in case anybody watching wants to do the same and needs to know where certain things are. And there's the insides. It looks like there's quite a lot of room in there. On the bottom of the case here you can see where the hard drive left the mark. Don't know what that is. I'm going to be removing this SCSI card because I won't be using it. I'm going to use this space for the compact flash card reader. These two bays will actually take 2 PCXT low profile 16-bit ISA expansion cards. There's quite a lot of screws on this computer, and some of them are actually missing as well. With hindsight, I should have had myself a little pot ready to put them in. And that's the hard drive caddy released. And there's my temporary solution for a hard drive. Luckily this PC has an IDE slot as well as a SCCSI slot, so this enabled me to install one of those compact flash card readers. And that's the expansion bay free. And there's the power supply buried underneath the motherboard. I think with hindsight, if they'd have designed something where the power supply could just simply slide out for maintenance, it would have been a lot better. I think this connecting point here is for a daughter board, which is something to do with the Mambo DVI Ethernet board. Again, I don't have any information on this, I'm just speculating. In order to release the motherboard from beneath, you need to first of all remove the connecting cables from the power supply to the motherboard, along with the keyboard cable and the floppy disk drive cable. And that's all situated under this flap, along with the expansion port for the 128K turbo cache module, which is optional. And there is that turbo cache expansion port. I'm still amazed at just how many connecting points there are for the card to plug into it. When I first bought this, the keyboard coiled cable itself was actually black. It looked like dirt and mould. At first I was worried that it may have perished. I have seen some of the compact versions of these computers with the same sort of cable that have actually rotted and just disintegrated and fallen to pieces. So once you manage to get your fingers in that tiny gap there, you've got two power supply cables there, along with the keyboard cable, and the ribbon cable there's for the floppy drive. I think there's a little clamp there, so you have to release first to release the ribbon cable. I must say I do like the modular design of this computer and the way that it's put together. Oops, man overboard. Might help if I remove the memory expansion card there. You need to do that in order to separate the motherboard. I'm always overly cautious. It's removing a board, that there are no more cables that I may have missed connecting things together. The last thing you want is a torn ribbon cable. And at the back there you've got the ribbon cable there for the monitor itself, and I think that little white cable is for the LED activity lights. And finally we can now see the power supply. As you can see, it's quite a long box. And there it is, finally released. Kind of reminds me of one of those jewellery deposit boxes you have in a bank where you put your bag of diamonds in. At first glance it looks quite clean inside, no dust or anything, and initially you can't physically see anything wrong with it. I was actually quite surprised it wasn't caked in dust, especially at the fan end, because usually when there's a fan in there and the air gets pulled through, it brings the dust in with it. At this point I was just having a quick probe around just to see what voltages were coming out of the two DC cables there. And initially, like I said, from cold you don't really get anything at all. I managed to find a manual for this on manuallibs.com, and this is a list here of the voltages that I should be getting out of each of those two sockets. So it would seem that I have some leaking capacitors, which explains quite a lot actually, because the power supply was just taking that long to come on originally. It did give a good indication it was the capacitors. Number C14 there in the middle, which I've removed, was leaking quite badly. It smelled quite fishy when I was removing it, which is usually a good indication that they've gone bad, along with the green residue you get around them. But sometimes you can't see it because it's hidden right underneath. But saying that, I have spotted a couple of others that are also leaking. So I've ordered a load off of eBay. Unfortunately I don't have any in my kit there. I was hoping I'd be able to use some of those and get it working straight away. But I'm going to have to wait a few days now before they come and before I can continue. So I'll be back soon. Okay, here we are. It's about a week later. I've been on eBay looking for the parts that I need, and all the capacitors have come. Unfortunately, one lot I didn't check their sizes. These here, they're going to be physically too big, so I had to go and order some more from somebody else because the seller didn't have them any smaller. So it's always worth checking the leg spacings and the actual diameter of the capacitor itself as well. But I've still got those in case I ever need them for another project. Sometimes you can get away with the larger sizes. It just depends on the population of the board and how tight things are. Also, I think I probably should have looked elsewhere next time for buying capacitors, because buying them off of eBay you can't always get everything you need from one seller. So invariably you end up buying lots from different people, end up paying postage more than you need to, and yet you end up buying like 5s and 10s of them as well when you may only need 1 or 2. So with hindsight, I probably should have looked elsewhere online and just ordered exactly what I needed. It would have saved on wastage as well on the envelopes and paperwork. So I have already actually started work on the power supply board. I had some capacitors in one of those kits that you buy with about 500 in, but of course they've never got everything you need. And there's some quite unusual values for some of these as well on this board. I'm going to replace every single capacitor. There's no point in just skimping and replacing a couple that look bad, because as I take them all off I should imagine I'm going to find some more that are leaking as well. Apart from these two here, these look absolutely fine, and I've checked them with a multimeter and they are holding a voltage, so I should believe in those two. So let's get started then. Okay, so I'm all set up now. I think I've got everything here that I need. Capacitors, soldering iron, solder sucker, fan to take the fumes away or to help a bit, and some isopropyl alcohol there to clean off any capacitor residue that I may find. Just going to mark where I need to remove so I don't unsolder the wrong thing. 5 volts, 390 US. Going to add some fresh solder to the legs just to make them easier to get out. Well, as you can see there is a tiny bit of leakage there from a capacitor. The other two are okay. So it's definitely worthwhile swapping them all out, because you just never know. Okay, well that's the last of the 24 capacitors. I've now swapped out. Next thing to do is going to be to clean all the flux off of the board from where I've been soldering. As I was working along, I cleaned off any leakages I found with a cotton bud and some pure alcohol, and there wasn't that many actually, probably about 4, maybe 5. But still, like I said, there's no point in being tight and not just replacing a couple. You may as well replace the lot while you're here. You don't want to be taking this all apart again, just replace some more, maybe a year or 2 down the line. Okay, so it's all back together now. Moment of truth. Let's switch it on and hopefully it won't go bang. I've not got any load on it. Just going to see if the little fan there on the end comes on. That was weird. It made a funny sound, didn't it? Hello everyone, and we're back. A few more days have passed because I noticed I'd missed out a couple of capacitors. 2 little ones there hiding underneath that cable which I didn't spot. So I thought while I'm here I may as well replace those as well. So they came in the post and I just replaced them. But before I replaced those, even when I powered the computer back up after replacing all these capacitors on this side, it was still taking a while to come back on. Like it did originally when I first bought it. Basically you can switch it on at the mains on the switch on the side, and like you have to wait 2 or 3 minutes before the computer actually comes on. So I'm hoping that replacing those 2 little ones there will remedy that. I've done another inspection of those 2 there and they seem to be fine, so I haven't replaced those because I think it's about 15 quid for a pair of those, and I've already spent quite a lot on this. So I'm going to see how I go with just replacing those 2 little ones and see if it comes on and stays on permanently now. Well, it stayed on before, so it was just taking a few minutes to come on. But interestingly, once it does eventually start up, you can shut down and restart as many times as you like, and it carries on coming on. It just seems to be from cold. But one thing else I noticed as well, that if I do turn it on and it doesn't come on, switch it back off, leave it for a couple of minutes to allow the capacitors to drain down, then come back, turn it on again, then it comes on. Quite an unusual fault. If anybody has any information on what that could be, please do let me know in the comments. So next thing to do is to get some what do you call it? I've forgotten the paste, heat paste. I've forgotten the name of it. It's escaped me at this moment. Across the back of that heatsink, because that makes contact with the case to help disperse the heat better. So we'll do that next, and I'll reassemble and power it up again and see what happens. Just noticed on the main motherboard there are some capacitors on here as well that I've forgotten to order. I thought, well, while I'm here I may as well replace them all. But as I've only got a couple of them, I've got those 2 there and one of those. I'll replace those for now, but at a later date I will replace out the other ones as well. There's no point in not doing it. You may as well just do the whole lot, because eventually they are going to go. So I shall do that next, and then we'll get to reassembling it and powering on. Out of those 4 capacitors I was going to replace, unfortunately 2 of them are at the front of the board I couldn't do. That's one of them there. As you can see, just a little bit too tall. There literally is about 2mm between the top and the bottom there, if that, probably 1mm. So I've left those out. I did unsolder them and had a look at them, and they both look okay. So I've just left them as they are for now. Just thought I'd mention that. Obviously I forgot to check the clearance, just assumed that they would fit. Okay, next thing on the agenda is to swap out the compact flash card reader I was originally using, because originally I think it came with a SCCSI hard drive, but now I'm using obviously an IDE compact flash card reader, which I just had floating around inside the case. You can now get these, well they've probably been around a while, but that'll actually slot into the card bay just there. I'll try and remove that SCCSI card because I won't be needing that, and mount it in there. When I first tried it with this cable, it worked fine. But the strange thing is when I put the extended cable in, it turns out that the pin 1 was the opposite way around. So I had to shave off the little bump there that helps you locate it the right way around, so it would fit the opposite way around. There's always something else to test you, and another bump in the road, as it were. At first I thought the computer had gone wrong again because the screen wouldn't come on and that red light stayed on permanently, until I realised about the pin 1. So now that I've figured that out, the next thing to look at will be the full-size CD-ROM that fits in here. Again, that was a SCCSI drive. If I remember rightly, it wasn't working, it wasn't reading discs, or I think it was just dead. It took my disc and wouldn't eject it back out. But I've got another SCCSI drive to put in, and we'll try that out. Just reassembling the compact flash card adapter because it was moving about a bit, so I put some of that decoupage foam underneath to help keep it separate from the networking card. So I didn't want it to end up touching, because as you pull the card in and out, it's going to end up moving about quite a bit. So I put some of that foam underneath, so that will keep them separated. Okay, the case is all back together now. Just need to plug in the power supply into the motherboard, which is quite close quarters in here. One, two, and then the floppy drive. Even though it's not working, I'm still going to plug it in because it will stop the computer from hunting for it and pausing for ages on boot up. Fingers crossed. Nothing. Well, I've been messing about with this now for about 2 hours since I've changed the capacitors. I've had the power supply in and out. The voltage wasn't getting to 12 volts on the output rail. It just seems to be measuring 4 or 5. But suddenly I put it all back together and it's now come on. So I just thought I'd film this quickly just while it's actually working. So I've no idea if it will come back on once I switch it off again. So all those capacitors I've changed seems to have worked eventually. As you can see, it's putting up the errors because the keyboard's not connected and the CMOS batteries failed. But it's working. Can't believe it. I'm so pleased that it's actually going. Fingers crossed it will carry on working. I'm going to switch it off in a bit and try and turn it back on again. Okay, let's try powering it on again. There you go, it's working now. Seems to be quite intermittent. And obviously I've replaced 3 caps on the motherboard as well, so let's see if it still works, fingers crossed. Must change that BIOS battery actually. I've got to do the memory test. Oh, I forgot to put in the 8 meg expansion card, so it's not going to load Windows 98 without that. As you can see, it's coming straight on again. It's such an awkward, an unusual fault from cold. It just doesn't want to come on. But after a few attempts to switch it on and off, it eventually comes on. And there we go, Windows 98 is loading. I don't know if the microphone's picking up that sound that just started. It's a little PCMCIA hard drive I've got plugged in the side. I've not managed to get Windows 98 to show it up in the desktop yet though. It's finding it in the device manager, but it's not showing up in my computer. Well, there we go. After replacing all those capacitors, at least it's still actually coming on eventually. So I've not done any damage to it in the process of trying to make it better. Okay, I've now plugged in a mouse. I've got an old Kensington Orbit mouse here, which I've plugged in. And I've got a caddy with a CD-ROM in. I haven't used one of these for a while. So I'm going to pop this in now and see if it takes the disc. So let's have a look. Let's see if it actually works straight away without messing around setting it all up. Yes, it's worked. Wow. Just put in a random digital camera driver's disc there. That's good then. Now I've got a CD-ROM drive. Well, and here we are finally, all set up, all plugged in, and the recapping is all done. Time to do a demonstration, actually see this thing in operation. Now I have installed quite a number of games on this already to try out, and I've had quite a bit of trouble actually with most of them. Got Star Wars Rebel Assault there, that one I couldn't get any sound to work. Star Wars X-Wing, that did actually work, though it did judder slightly. There's a lot of clicking on the audio. Dark Forces, we'll try that in a moment. I've installed it. Alien Trilogy, that crashes. Even in DOS mode that crashes. And Duke Nukem 3D was the one I had the most trouble with. I've tried all sorts with that. With the sound options, it basically says that there's an IRQ conflict. And I've tried all different ways of setting it up. Changing all the ports and everything and the DMAs, and I've had no success yet. I can get the music to work, but unfortunately can't get the sound effects to work. And obviously that game is nothing without sound effects. Project X there, that will work in DOS mode, but again can't get the sound to work. It's obviously pointed towards the sound card on this, with it being a Microsoft onboard sound card. It's probably more geared towards presentation stuff and not gaming. Obviously, this is not really a gaming PC, but this is really what I bought it for. So I think going forward, I think what I'm going to have to do is swap out that Ethernet card and put a sound card in there instead, and then take the audio out of the sound card and go into the audio input on the back of this to be able to use the amplifier in this to use these speakers. Because it seems pointless really not using the speakers that are in the amplifier, because that was the whole point in it in the first place for me, because I wanted to have a little portable DOS gaming system. So let's quickly try Dark Forces, see if that works. So I've installed it. I'm getting close to filling up the 1 GB compact flash card already. You don't realise just how much space all these games take up. Not quite sure what it's doing there. You forget just how fickle Windows 98 can be sometimes. Now, will it ask for the disk? Let's just go to setup first. Try that. I've had to slightly have the monitor slightly out of focus with the one of the cameras, because otherwise it picks up the flickering and it looks like a lenticular effect on the screen, which is quite off-putting. So sorry for this off focus, and I apologise for the fan sound for this as well. It's quite loud. Right. Loading drivers. All the utilities for these DOS games all vary quite considerably actually. Some of them are auto-detect, apart from NUKEM, that one there does make you add them in manually. There's no auto-detection on that one, unfortunately. Let's do Express and see how we get on. Detecting hardware. So if it doesn't crash. So it's found a sound card. It's going to... It's saying Sound Blaster 2, which has been quite common actually with a lot of these. It seems to default to that one. Oh, the music's working. Testing digital sound now. Fingers crossed. No, it didn't work. Just clicked. It's always the sound effects that don't work. So that's not going to work either then. Let's just go into advanced and see if there's anything there quickly. Sometimes they work better just in DOS mode without going through Windows 98. But, so certainly Project X did, because that wouldn't work in Windows 98 environment. Express Custom. That's that one. Detect successful hardware version 202. Oh. Well, that's working now, so we might be okay with that then. Test music. Yeah, that's working, so we might be alright with this one. Save current options, yes. Should have made a note of what those IRQ settings were. Can always go back into it. Don't boot this. So let's try and run it. CD-ROM access error. Oh, it's asking for the disk. Forget just how complicated these old DOS games are to get started. It's all worth it in the end though, for that nostalgia. To say the size of the speakers are quite large, there's actually not a lot of bass out of them. I was quite surprised actually. Oh, don't need to see that, we know how that ends. The screen's not brilliant on this actually, it's quite white looking, it's not, the blacks certainly aren't black. Contrast ratio is very low, certainly by today's standards. In fact, the contrast ratio is just 60:1. Screen technology has certainly come a long way. The screen resolution here is just 640 by 480. You can obviously plug in an external monitor and the screen resolution go up to 1024 by 1024. Loading mission. I'll shorten all this in editing. Just about make out what that is in the background there. It's supposed to be a ship of some kind. There we go. Some memories here. So spent hours on this. I definitely need to get myself a joystick for this. Using a mouse is not fun. Another good reason to add a sound card, they're not giving me that option in the joystick. I can't even remember where you're supposed to go next, it's been that long. Well, I think that'll do for that demonstration. Let's try a platform game now, one of my personal favourites. NUKEM 2. I've already tried this one out so I know it works. Need to find my copy of Doom actually, I've not found it yet. I just love those Duke Nukem games. They're still so entertaining, aren't they, even after all these years? Well, that just about brings me to the end of this video now. Time for a conclusion. I do actually love this computer still, despite all the headaches I've had with it. I think it's quite an amazing machine actually for the time period. I am disappointed though that they didn't include a Sound Blaster compatible sound card. That would have saved me certainly a lot of headaches along the way. With its built-in multimedia speakers and the optional CD-ROM drive, which obviously I have now, I do think they had a missed opportunity there in my opinion. And let's be honest, if it had that sound card built in, this would have been an absolute epic gaming PC for the time period, which was my original intention for this PC, and it still will be going forward. I certainly will be looking out for a sound card for it. And then, well, like I said before, I mentioned about that audio cable coming out the side, going into the audio input on the back of this machine to utilise its own built-in amplifier. When I do get around to doing that, I'll do a follow-up video on it, and we'll see what it sounds like compared to the sound footage I've already done with the built-in sound card. And you never know, I may actually come across that Mamba board one day, along with a turbo cache module, which I think this computer really could do with. When I have tried the Duke Nukem 3D game out, it does tend to sort of stutter a little bit of juddering there. And when you look at the specs of all these games, this computer does more than meet the needs. So I was quite surprised about that really. But I've got it saved in my eBay searches, both those items, so you never know, one day they may crop up. I have had things in my eBay searches for a couple of years before, and eventually they have turned up. Recently a video camera I was after for quite a long time finally turned up. I couldn't believe it. I guess with eBay anything's possible these days. Now I am still getting the annoying problem with it booting up from cold. It just doesn't seem to want to come on. You hear that clicking sound. It almost sounds like it's the choke. I don't know. But when I've done some further research online, some people do suggest that some of the ICs may have a mechanical fault. Inside the IC there's a fine gold wire that goes from the leg to inside the IC, and when they're cold obviously they shrink. And if one of those is slightly disconnected, after it's sort of in the preheat stage, in the primary stage of the power supply, that little bit of warmth it's getting is probably making it connect and be intermittent. Because as I say, no matter how many times I restart it once it's been on for a few minutes, it's absolutely fine. It could even be as simple as a dry joint on one of the ICs. I'm kind of kicking myself now for not checking that out while I had it all open. I guess I was so focused on changing out the capacitors that it escaped my mind. But for now I think I'm going to call it a day. But maybe one day I'll revisit it and go back in and have a look at that. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching this with me. For me, this went on for well over a year. Been doing all the research and looking for parts and waiting for things to come, trying to find parts for it as well. Like I said, looking on eBay. I wanted to do this computer some justice really, because it's such a special machine. These don't come up very often actually in the wild. In fact, I don't think I've seen one of these on eBay since I bought mine 2 years ago. In fact, it's getting on for 3 years now because it was actually 2019. Yeah, so as I say, because I haven't been able to get hold of those parts, I've not really been able to give it a full demonstration of all of its capabilities. So fingers crossed one day those parts may crop up, and then I'll do a follow-up video. If you remember this computer incidentally when it actually came out originally, or you used it in the past, or have any further information about it, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Or if you have any suggestions regarding those sound settings, the onboard sound card, or any other information for that matter, please feel free to leave a comment below and I'll respond to you. Well, I think that's just about it for this video. That just leaves me to say, as always, thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll be seeing you.